I hear words like Florida is the big loser. And my study indicates that is not accurate. What is Florida is the big loser and Florida is the big gainer. And you might say, how? The answer is if the parts of the Florida that are prone to flooding, which is, in my belief, going to get worse and worse. There's portions of flood because of sea level rise that people are measuring. And so as that happens, those parts of Florida will lose access to the 30-year mortgage. Okay. And we don't have the time to talk about it today, but there's clear evidence that we will lose the 30-year mortgage for parts of the United States because of climate risk over the next 5 to 10 years. And so when that happens, people will not want to go there because they can't get proper financing. Now, a lot of people are like, so that means Florida is a big loser. Actually, the evidence suggests that most of these people are not going to leave Florida simply because they can't live at the beach, because there are many beaches in Florida that'll be just fine. Okay, so Florida is not going to become a beachless place. The beach changes, right? It comes a little bit inward, but there's still a beach. It's still beautiful. So people still want to live there. So the winners are places inland in Florida. The big winner is places like parts of Tampa that are 20 miles away from the sea, Orlando, Lakeland, Sarasota, places that are not necessarily as exposed are going to be the big winner. So money moves inland and maybe moves inland 5 miles, 10 miles. It should only really move 1 or 2 miles, but that's not how money moves. People are careful, so it'll move 5, 10, 15, 20 miles inland. So there's going to be a lot of inland moves. Some money will move out of Florida simply because people will be afraid to invest in Florida because they'll hear on the news worsening conditions. They'll hear on the news that this particular town lost access to the 30-year mortgage simply because there's too much exposure there and people are like, I don't want to underwrite something 30 years. So I think that when more and more of the bad news starts to appear, there's going to be an impact on Florida there. I think there's going to be an impact on New York. There's going to be an impact on the San Francisco Bay Area. All along the coastline, we're going to see impacts, but we're going to see people move inwards. Now, not everybody will move inwards. Some people will just migrate away. So the big winner in the last 10 years has been the southeast of the United States, Texas, Florida, Georgia. These are basically the big losers because the hurricanes and the typhoons are going to make insurance so expensive and make mortgages so expensive in these areas that you're going to see some people move out of these areas. Is it going to be in the biggest migration of all time? No, I don't think so. I don't think of this as catastrophic as COVID, right? COVID obviously has created a lot of moves across the United States. It's not like that. It's a slow moving disaster. And so what happens is that that while Florida and Texas, I think, are going to stay lucrative places for people to live in, there's going to be a subsection of investors, especially rich investors, that are going to say, what states are better than these? I need to have some assets there. And the winners, and that's the big focus that I want to talk about. The winners are going to be Oregon, Washington, Idaho, places like Montana. And then some of the markets like Detroit, Michigan is very good. And you have to look at it from different aspects. You're not just looking at hurricanes and typhoons. You're looking at, let's look at flooding. Let's look at tidal flooding, which is sea level rise. Let's look at water. Let's look at water tables. Let's look at droughts. And let's grade all these states. And it's clear that Oregon has a lot of water. They have a lot of tree cover. They don't suffer from hurricanes. They don't suffer from typhoons. So it looks like Oregon, Idaho, these are definitely big winners. And why don't I talk about some of those states in the Northeast? Because you might say they're big winners too. Yes. But Alan, the problem with those states is financially and fundamentally, those states are not doing so well. Whereas Oregon, Washington, and Idaho are on fire from other fundamental and structural benefits. They're already economically set for a boom in the next 10 years. So what you're doing is you're adding a boom on top of a boom. And that's the gold rush that I talk about. I don't think the gold rush is going to strike Michigan because of climate risk. I think gold rush is going to strike Idaho, places like Boise, places like Idaho Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, I think are going to become the cities that benefit from the gold rush. And places in Oregon like Eugene are going to benefit from this. So bottom line is we need to study those Western markets, Northwestern markets, which are going to become ideal places to live 30 years from now as temperatures just keep shooting up. It's projected that in 20 years, Phoenix will have roughly 52 days a year of over 120 degrees.
Wow.
You start to see concrete melt at that point of time. Will people still live in Phoenix then? Of course, it's a powerful metro. But I don't think that the rate of inward migration is going to be anywhere close to what it is today. So there's a shift, and that these shifts are what creates money for investors. Investing over a 10-year time frame. Again, I go back to this. If you just bought a tiny amount of Amazon stock in 1996, you would be insanely rich today. Just absolutely filthy rich. And I think that is what I'm talking about here. Climate risk will force every ship in these states to rise. Every ship. And Blackstone and places like that are leading. Have you noticed, for example, that Bill Gates is one of the largest farmers in the US? You may want to check to see where he's buying farmland. Have you noticed that Blackstone itself is now talking about farmland becoming a big deal because parts of the United States simply won't have the farmland that they have today. Basically, if farmland becomes more, and you might say, I'm a real estate investor, I'm not looking at farmland. So what? If farmland goes up in an area that you're investing in real estate, that real estate will go up because farmland's more expensive, which means that it's harder to build new buildings, which means that your rents are going to go up. Your existing buildings rents are going to go up. It's about all ships rising. These things are so incredibly powerful. We saw these effects in California over 3 or 4 decades. We then saw Texas over the last decade and a half. We've seen impacts like this in Miami. This is the next big one. I do not see any that are comparable to this. And I think it's these northwestern states that are the big winners. So just the 3 that I mentioned, and Utah, I think, is going to do really well as well because they've got some of these states have challenges. I think Idaho has less challenges. Oregon has less challenges. Utah's got some challenges, but I think they'll figure out how to deal with some of these. You're going to see these smaller states do well. Notice that I didn't mention any big states doing well. I don't think Texas, Florida, California are winners. I think that they're net losers over a 30-year time frame where these smaller states are going to become hotter and hotter. And I do want to point out to you that some of this has already happened, right? So I'm not just predicting the future. Today, Google, fastest growing cities in the US, and you'll notice that Boise, Idaho comes up more often than any other city, right? Austin, Texas comes up. You might say, let me see if Austin, if it's got a high impact on climate change and low impact. And 5 minutes into your research, you notice that Austin has one of the lowest impacts on climate change within Texas, right? Within Texas. There's other parts of Texas that have a much higher climate change. Austin doesn't get a lot of hurricanes or things like that because it's pretty east. Pretty west. So it doesn't get hit by hurricanes. There's obviously no tidal flooding. It's nowhere near sea areas. So when you look at this, you go, there's a pattern developing here. Boise, Idaho is doing really well. Portland, a good part of Portland that's inland is doing really well. You're seeing Spokane develop, and Spokane's nowhere near the sea. And today in 2021 ratings, Spokane off, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Falls, places in Salt Lake City.